and you gonna murder this one and murder that one. Talking all that bullshit. I'm gonna put it to you like this, yo.
This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me. I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What is poppin', everybody? And welcome back to another special episode of the Only Friends podcast. Well, you know, it's me and my only friends, which includes, but it's not limited to, what's poppin', Jesse?
What's poppin', Conrad? How are you? How's the family?
Oh, I'm chilling.
Yeah, kids are good?
Yeah, the family's in this room. What do you mean? I'm missing Corey, but you know.
So, we could use a little Corey, that's for sure.
Who's your redheaded stepchild if you had to have one?
Redheaded stepchild?
Yeah, like the one who's most neglected, if you will.
I mean, you fold too much.
Okay, that's fair.
When they do weird shit with kings and shit, nobody's about that life, man.
Right.
Old man, coffee ass nigga.
He liked the Jack's shove, you know, from Joanne.
He'd like anything Joanne does.
Yeah.
Joanne's my homie. This is true.
What's poppin', Lamanna?
Chilling, man. Another day.
How the Pirates do this week? Miserable, down bad. Can't
They're so
win,
bad.
huh?
They're so bad. Yeah, and they can't hit. They can pitch. They can't hit. They can't field. They don't know how to run the bases.
Did Skeens win the other day?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
They crushed that game.
All
But
right, well, you got a little
they're
start.
right back to where they, scored 10 runs, and then they scored 0.
Oh, okay.
I just watched an interview with, I can't remember who it was, but it's like a baseball insider and a podcast host. And he was saying that he went to Forbes to check to see what the revenue was of some of the smaller market teams.
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh's making like $365 million or something along those lines. And they were right in the same cluster of like the Brewers.
I mean, they're worth $365 million.
No, that's their annual
Oh, revenue.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
They're gross. And they're right in the same realm as like the Brewers, the Reds, the Twins, the Royals, like basically a cluster of small market teams.
Mm-hmm.
None of them spend under $135 million a year on their payroll.
Of course.
Except for the Pirates.
We spend under 100.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That was the point.
Yeah.
It's kind of rough.
Impossible.
Beautiful, man. It's like Moneyball, but without the strategy behind it.
Without the winning.
Yeah. That's
They did. They were one of the first teams to like really dive into analytics when it like started to become popular in like 2011, 2012, 2013. And that's how they actually were able to compete with the bigger market teams in those 4 years that they were actually good, you know, with shifting and pitch framing. And there was a book called Big Data Baseball they actually wrote about it. It was really
talking
good.
about Pirates?
Yeah, Pirates, yeah.
What year did the A's, what year was Moneyball supposed to be about? It was
2001 maybe?
That's the number I had in my head, too.
Yeah, 2001, 2, something
That's
like
literally
that.
the year I had in my head.
Yeah, I think
Well,
so.
because 2004 is when the Red Sox won the World Series for the first time in like 100 years, and it was before that because they tried to hire him to do specifically that. That always made me tear up at the end. I know that's like the most crappy, dumb thing to like get sentimental about, but like this guy got shat on by the entire world for a strategy that's like extremely reasonable, and to see him just get offered payment that's more than any other coach in sports was like a really nice moment.
Absolutely.
Like one person was finally like, yeah, you did it. Nice job.
But he didn't take it, right?
No, he
stayed
was
in Oakland.
loyal to the A's. He wanted to keep getting paid nothing to get yelled at for not doing things right.
They might be the only bigger joke of a franchise than Pittsburgh right now, to be honest.
I mean, we at least spent some money on some, or I say we because, you know, it's the Las Vegas A's now. But we at least spent some money on Servina.
I mean,
2 years, $40 million.
That's not spending some money. I mean, sure.
That's
whatever.
half your payroll.
It is half our payroll.
He was also talking about the free agent acquisitions during the offseason. I think they spent like $16.5 million in free agent acquisitions when they have the number one pitcher in all of baseball.
They spent that much?
Right. Well, they re-signed Kutch.
Yeah. Kutch was $5 million.
Yeah.
So he's $5 million. He got another. I think Pham was like what, $4 million or something.
But yeah,
like
this is a very different feel than when they drafted Cole and he came up and they actually built pieces around him. It's very clear they're just gonna like exhaust Skeens' 4 years, send him to the Yankees.
So sad.
Oh, at least the Yankees have, just churning it out, baby.
Trade him now. Just get rid of him now. What are we doing?
No, we're not giving you Jason Dominguez. Relax.
Well, you wouldn't get anything.
Huh?
You wouldn't get anything.
For Skeens?
Yeah, I mean, like, these trades are always drastically undervalued. What are you going to get? 12 prospects and a few draft picks? It
doesn't matter.
Bucket of balls and some money?
We'll give you Spencer Jones.
You would get something pretty good because if you traded him now, the team you trade him to would have
control for
4 years of control like that. Yeah, for nothing, you should be able to get a lot.
Yes, you can get a lot, but you wouldn't. It would never be a fair trade. You would never get like you couldn't just swap him for Judge. If that's what you were looking for. Not that
you don't want
not that they should be looking for that anyway.
That wouldn't solve a problem.
Of course not.
You need like he's
not even a fair swap for Judge though. Like they're still getting the best of it in my opinion with Skeens.
If you swapped him,
you would need Judge and additional players.
If you like swapped him for like 4 or 5 players that could bat like 275. That would like improve the team.
Yeah, but like improve them from the worst team in the league to like the bottom tier. What will improve the team is spending. It just
of course
clearly that.
Of course, they're not going to do that. They're also not going to trade Skeens.
Nor should they.
No, I'm not saying they should. I'm just like
they're probably going to make infinite money off of just like him being on the team.
No, their television contract just dropped. They actually are more poorly viewed than their AAA affiliate.
What about
their
like,
attendance?
Jersey?
Their attendance for the 4th time already this season was sub 10,000. They only had 1 game sub 10,000 last year.
That's wild.
I saw that stat.
What about Skeens like jersey sales and stuff like that?
But that's not going to move. That's not going to move.
And I think merch gets diluted a lot. I don't think it's just like dollar for dollar goes straight to the top.
Right, and like the thing is like even like you said with attendance. Everybody kind of like that wanted to go see Skeens, went and saw him last year.
Yeah.
And now they just like, it's like the newness of him.
Well, they also competitive early last year.
I would assume,
they started off super hot.
That is true too. Right. Where now it's just such a disaster that nobody.
Yeah, when you give no hope out of the chute, like people just aren't going to show up.
Right. No matter Skeens or no Skeens. Yeah.
Right. It's cold and they're not competitive.
Right.
Not to take this in a completely different direction.
Well, I was about to anyway. So go ahead.
Why aren't you guys doing merch? I could see a Just Pay shirt doing very well.
We were messing around with it. The problem is that my biggest Achilles heel in business is marketing. I'm awful at it.
That's fair. It's a skill set a lot of people just don't.
And like I was talking to Brad Owen about it yesterday, asking him like how much merch made up his overall revenue, and he said it's more of a headache than a win. He said he had like 1 hoodie that did really well and had higher margins.
Who said this?
Brad Owens.
Okay.
The margins are pretty small, so you'd have to sell a lot of them.
Yeah, but the way that the market's set up now, you can have designs on order, and you never have to like hold inventory.
You
can have it direct.
That drastically shrinks your margins.
Exactly.
Does it?
Yeah, of course.
Right, of course, because you can't now buy in bulk for a cheaper price, and then
you could do it under that business model to test how much the market actually wants to buy stuff, and then you
can buy merch from us right now.
Yeah, we have.
It's on our page. There's like.
Can I get a Just Pay shirt?
Not yet.
We could make it.
How about allegedly? I want allegedly.
We could literally make a Just Pay shirt.
It's Guapo.
Yeah, and then
that's all Guapo. Guapo put that together. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. But
so you wouldn't get sued by anyone if you had the allegedly.
Oh no, he definitely stole that from the internet.
Yeah, I took it from the internet.
But I'm sure we could, give it to our graphic designer and say, change this.
I mean, here's the thing:
make the ostrich look slightly like Berkey, and we're good to go.
We could just put an ostrich instead of an emu.
You can make the margins. I mean, literally whatever you want because you set the price. It's just you're not going to sell any shirts if you make it too high, right?
Well, I don't know. It seems like you guys have a very like niche group, like
a loyal fan base.
Yeah, I don't want to say like cults. Cult is.
We don't want to gouge them either.
Well, when I think of like when I hear the word cult, like in any sort of fan base, I think of like movies that aren't like you have like superhero movies that everyone goes to see, but no one. I mean, some people love them, but you know what I mean.
Right.
And then you have like stuff like, who's a good example? Kevin Smith movies, where like it has a smaller fan base, but everyone who likes those movies loves those movies.
Right.
You know what I mean?
A little subculture.
And wants to support.
But like the subculture of
a
cinema. The subculture of cinema is massive. The subculture of a game that's already like way too small is very, 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 very smart.
It's hundreds of people.
It's at most hundreds of people.
All I know is I want a Just Pay shirt. All right, fellas,
We can
let's get that going.
We can definitely take care of that.
I don't know if we can put the Monopoly guy on it.
What's up with the tab? What does that
Again,
represent?
you can just like change it.
You can ask Conrad about that.
Ever so
That's my
slightly.
tab with Berkey.
That's your tab with Berkey?
Yeah.
That was
How's that looking
that was
these
one of our
days?
first
It's
ones. That was a great
heavy.
one.
Heavy tab.
Sorry,
tabs,
I'm
heavy
doing
tabs.
I'm doing a bunch of back end work on YouTube because the title and image didn't update for some reason.
You know how they've gotten somebody's run the math on how much Owen Wilson makes per wow. You ever seen that before? I want to know how much you're making per what's popping.
I don't even know what WoW is from Owen Wilson.
That's because you don't know who Owen Wilson is.
It's
I forgot you
obviously-
don't watch comedy movies.
It's obviously like one of the Ben Stiller's friend.
Yes,
But where does WoW come
Ben
from?
Stiller's friend.
that counts.
That's
That's
amazing.
way more than I expected him to know about Owen
Right.
That
Wilson.
is accurate. That is
Yeah,
a
I mean,
fact about Owen
Definitely
Wilson.
does
I mean,
movies with.
They're all
Ben
they're all in
Stiller.
the same movie, right? They haven't done a movie without each other since fucking The Inception.
Literally.
I think they've only done one movie
Yeah, they've
together.
literally
Zoolander.
done one.
Wedding Crashers is like his famous,
Yeah.
most famous.
Although Ben Stiller may have directed Wedding Crashers for all I know. Wow.
Wedding Crashers is an unbelievable movie. I
It
just
really
ran that
is.
back with
So
Ashley
good.
recently. Yeah. Oh my god.
You know,
All
what's
of his little
unbelievable?
nicknames alone for
it's kind of crazy because that movie's what 20 years old.
yeah.
Pretty damn
Yeah, it
close.
still hits.
You know what's
Yeah.
unbelievable? The World Series of Dice.
You liked that, didn't you?
From Chappelle?
Yeah. You never seen that skit? We watched it at my
At the
place.
barbecue. Yeah.
Yeah, that
He
was
does
nice.
not like comedy. The man who laughs at fucking everything doesn't like comedy.
You'd seen the racial draft skit though.
Oh,
So
really?
we watched
Good.
some
Who
Chappelle.
does it?
That's a great skit.
That's amazing.
I think my favorite skit though. Yeah, I guess it's probably World Series of Dice. It's not the funniest one, but it's just such a
No way. That's like
I
not
mean,
even top 5 Chappelle skits.
The Black Klansman.
yeah, the Black
Klansman is definitely
That was
top five.
incredible.
Black Klansman was amazing
Clayton
too
Bigsby
because it
is-
was the
is-
first episode.
What,
That was the pilot.
Clayton Bigsby?
Yeah.
Bigsby? Really?
Yeah, the second episode he shows up and he's like, "Wow, we didn't get canceled. All right, let's do it." That's amazing.
Rick James.
I mean,
Yeah,
the
Rick
Clayton
James is
Bigsby
great.
one
Rick James is
is probably number 1 for overall creativity because like that's an out there idea to execute on. But the Rick James Charlie Murphy one is just
So
one of the
good.
most perfect storytelling things I've
Yeah.
ever seen in my entire
Is
life.
that the one with Prince playing basketball?
Yeah. Game blouses.
You want to know what my favorite skit from the whole show is? It's this little obscure like 30-second skit where they like fake one of those like on the street dating interviews, and they ask the girl like the craziest thing she did in college. She's like, "Oh, like one time me and my girlfriend like had sex with this guy together, and we were like kind of doing things together." And then they ask the guy what the craziest thing he did is, and he's like, "Well, that would probably be having sex with a little gangbang over here." He's like, "We're fucking done, man." And I just every time I watch that skit, I lose my mind.
Oh man.
Yeah, that one was good. No, his reoccurring characters were incredible.
Yeah.
What was the homeless guy who was a crackhead? He's like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they had Joe Rogan on. They did a Fear Factor. He
Yeah.
crushed.
Yeah.
Fear. That was a great skit.
Good
I
show,
smoke
good
rocks,
show.
Joe Rogan.
Like he's bringing out food that's like disgusting to eat, and he's asking for seconds because he's so hungry.
All right. We have a fun show today. Now that we got all that out of the way, we're gonna hear from Dustin Iannotti in 25 minutes or so. He's gonna call in, and we're gonna discuss the thread that he put out earlier. I guess it was actually last week at this point.
Yeah.
We did a show on it. I gave a lot of my thoughts, so this will be an opportunity for him to kind of elaborate on what he was talking about. Let everybody here ask him some questions. Maybe see where we agree or disagree. Prior to that, yesterday, was it yesterday or is it today? What's today's date?
Today's the 16th.
Okay, so yeah, it was yesterday. Yesterday, we just cruised right by it, but it was Black Friday. Or the
I know, we didn't say a
anniversary
word.
thereof.
I thought about that afterwards.
were the
Like, we didn't
sales?
say one word about it.
Not that Black Friday.
Oh, okay.
The-
We I think we kind of want to block it out of our mind, like it never happened.
I don't mind
you know?
skipping that one.
I don't think about it, man. It's
No,
been
I don't.
it's been
It's
a
amazing.
long
It's been
time.
14 years.
Yeah, like it.
Wow.
And it truly didn't affect me personally as much as everybody. I'll never forget this.
Indirectly, it did.
I don't think so. I don't think so at all.
Well, maybe not. You're doing pretty good. You're playing in the biggest games.
I just really don't think it impacted me
That's fair.
any
I think for
That's
some
fair.
people, it actually improved their lives in the long term. I know it did for me.
It fast tracks.
Sure.
It had to have fast tracked a lot of inevitable failure anyway, right? Like
people were able to just fail quicker and move on to something else and be successful somewhere else.
It's hard to find an exit from things that like you're kind of hooked into.
Yeah,
well,
I know, right?
I just meant more that
see that.
when it happened to me, I was playing mostly online, and I had just moved to Vegas, and it basically forced me to get out and play a lot more live, which I think was eventually kind of the path that you want to go if you want to make the most money in poker, because online dried up really hard.
Yeah.
Maybe partially due to Black Friday. And then also, like, I was a little bit more, I don't want to say introverted, but like in my own little world, and I was just grinding, and I had a couple friends that played poker, and most of my friends weren't poker players at all or weren't interested in the game. And because I was playing live, I just naturally became friends with a bunch of guys that I just talked poker with all the time, and I got way more immersed in the game. And I think that I would imagine there's people out there like me who had that similar effect, because you basically, if you're an American, you had one of two paths after that. You either became a live poker player or you moved to Canada or Mexico.
Yeah.
And you played online. And there were certainly a lot of people who did either or, but it was a pretty clear, like, which way you went.
I wonder how much in the way of success stories there are for people who relocated, because at the time I knew of many online professionals that were in their late 20s, maybe touching their early 30s, that went the relocation route. They went to Mexico. They did all that stuff. And when I say success stories, I'm qualifying as like, you know, made it, not got through it, you know, I'm not qualifying as like, you know, they're still in the game and they have 200K. I'm qualifying as like, you know, their names. I feel like it's no one.
Well,
but I feel like the live side is the opposite way.
Yeah.
Hooney was in Costa Rica.
Hooney would be a good example.
Crushed.
Yeah.
What exactly? A good example of what?
People who relocated after Black Friday.
I mean, obviously,
keep grinding online.
What about I think Coon was one of those guys who did that for the most part. Yeah.
I feel like he was here.
Honestly, I gotta say, like, I would imagine if you took everyone who relocated and moved to Canada and played online, and everyone who went to
specifically Vancouver,
Mexico, I feel like the Canada guys did way better.
I completely agree with you. I think
people went to Mexico partying.
I was gonna say, you stay out of trouble in Canada. You know, it's cold and dreary. You're just inside playing online poker.
Yeah.
Instead, you're in Cabo just partying the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I hung out with those guys down in Cabo. They had fun down there. That's for sure.
I think you're right, because I don't think Jason necessarily full-time moved, but you're right, he definitely spent time in Vancouver, and I think so did Ike. Like that whole little
Jason moved
group.
to Vancouver into the apartment complex that had Galfond and like Ben 86.
Him and Tolerine were good friends.
And
I think Ike was there. I mean, for sure he's the best example of somebody who benefited from that transition.
He would have done well either way, though.
For sure.
He was like, I'm a good example of like my course got steered for me.
Yeah.
And it was for the better, probably.
Yeah.
I think Jason was just inevitably going to do well at poker.
Yeah, but like his biggest, he's spoken about this a lot. His number one asset is his work ethic. Yeah. And I think like they taught him how to work smarter. Right? Like he was always the hardest working live guy that I knew. But the problem with that pre-tools is that it sends you down a trajectory of like you're just playing in the minutia a lot, and it's a real mind fuck because you're getting in no volume, right? Like I've told this story a bunch and it still resonates with me today, but there was a tournament in like, I want to say it was like 2011 World Series. It was like a 1500 or something like that. He, Brent, and Baldy all final tabled it, but I was like chip leader at dinner day one.
What is this event?
It was like a 1500 no limit at the World Series. And towards the end of day one, I had a slew of bad beats that like took me down to like 25 bigs. And I just decided to limp jam deuces and just like yeet it off. You know, back then you made the money bagging, basically. Like you either came back in the money or you came back to like, you know,
like four away
basically
or something.
Bubble play. Yeah. Maybe it was a 1K. Anyway, I'm just like over it. So I limp jam deuces, run into tens, lose. And at the time, Jason was like one table over, and I saw that he had like 4 big blinds or something like that. And, you know, I busted like during hand for hand. So he's bagging as I'm busting. And I was like, I was like, wow, you made it, like you bagged, like congratulations, like what do you got? He's like, I got like 5 blinds. And I'm like, how? Like how on earth? And he's like, you just got to have the heart to stay in there, you know? And at the time, like that was the antithesis of everything that I believed about poker. It was like, I'm not nitty enough to salvage a 5 big blind stack because I didn't think about the global strategy of tournaments, right? It was about like, I want to play a lot of hands. I want to like be able to do stuff, maneuver, and all this other shit. And if you have 5 blinds, you're just patiently waiting for aces or ace king, whatever. He goes on to final table that maybe got like top 3, and I ran into him. Or actually, that's what it was. I didn't run into him at the end of day 1 bagging. I stormed off, obviously. I ran into him at the final table because Brent was there. So I went to sweat Brent, and I run into him. I go, "How the fuck are you here? You had like crumbs at the end of day 1." And he gave me the speech. And I was like, God damn it. Like, you know, there's something to take away from that. But my point, my overarching point here is like, what allowed him to do that is absolutely a skill worth cultivating in the live arena, but it can't be what you build your entire like mindset of strategy around, right? And I'm not saying that he would have fell victim to this because tools did emerge and he's a smart guy. He would have found them, I'm sure. But I know the conditioning effect of live. And like the same reason why I couldn't have done what he did at that time was the reason why he was able to. Like we just took very polarizing mindsets towards how to beat the live fields. And they both worked in some degree because, you know, everything was really soft back then. So all I'm really speaking to is that like, and he said this on record a ton, so I know I'm not like putting words in his mouth, but the influence of like Ike and Tollerine and these guys that were like career online grinders that rose to the highest stakes, I'm certain just influenced him and like gave him that tunnel vision towards like, okay, this is exactly how to build a roadmap to beat poker moving forward.
Sure. It's also nice to get in early on playing as game theory optimal as possible because back then, like 2013, you were basically figuring out what GTO meant on your own.
Yeah.
And those guys, they weren't like spot on, but they were much closer than anybody else.
Way ahead of it.
Yeah, and that's going to give you like 4 or 5 years to build a role playing whatever stakes of whatever games you want. Like I think Jason was, I might be wrong, but I think he was doing quite well at like the heads up sit and goes, like 5K heads up sit and goes and stuff.
I feel like that might have come later.
Might have.
He had most of his success. He was Nova Sky, I think, on Full Tilt and Coon on Stars, or maybe the inverse. But I think he had most of his success in like the big majors, like F-Tops and Scoops and stuff like that.
Yeah, he certainly may have.
Yeah, I always knew he was an MTT guy. But you know, again, you're right that back then, like we just chased EV. Like, good luck painting me with a specific brush back then. It's like, oh yeah, he's a cash guy. It's like, yeah, but like, you know, I played 10,000 games on Full Tilt that year. Also,
10,000 tournaments?
Probably.
Damn.
I mean, I played a lot.
That's insane.
Only for like a 9-month window, and then I never played again. Well, Black Friday came. That was also it was like my true exit. I remember I had gotten off the plane.
You were so happy. Not happy, but
I was happy. I was happy. I had just gotten off the plane in New Orleans for my college catcher's bachelor party. So I'm walking down Bourbon Street, and this kid I play baseball with, who's not even in poker, but he's like a poker fan and dabbled a little bit, but we were pretty good friends through baseball. He calls me. He goes, "Yo, you hear the news?" I go, "No. Why are you calling? I'm in New Orleans. What the fuck do you want?" And he's like, "They shut it all down." I'm like, "Shut down what?"
He was right.
I'm like, "Shut down what?" He goes, "Full Tilt Stars, everything. Like, online poker is absolutely finished." And I go, I don't like, because he's not in the industry. So I'm just like, okay, buddy. Like,
you've heard like 3 or 4 phone calls like this where they're not.
There was because
wrong.
there was rumors that it was going to shut down for a few years prior to that.
So I just gave him the like surprised voice. I was like, oh, I'll check it out. You know, so I get back to my room, I fire up the laptop, and I just get the screen of death that Guapo just put up, the FBI screen. And I was like, holy fucking shit. And I don't remember which of my friends I called, probably Brent, because it affected him the most. Which was probably
I was with him in Coachella. Him.
Oh yeah,
Phil Collins, Brandon Garrity. We were all at Coachella.
So that would probably have been the worst person for me to call.
Put a damper on the weekend. Let me tell you,
it truly affected him the most. And I just remember going, "I'm so fucking happy."
Yep. And he's like, "What do you fucking mean you're happy? I have $100,000 on there."
More, way more. Yeah. I ended up buying it. I remember I bought it at a small. Well, he sold it at a small discount. Yeah, whatever. Long story, but
So it sounds like you did make out for full tilt going on there.
we were sharing a horse on there who somehow is the only person in the entire world that wasn't a Red Pro and never got paid back from Full Tilt. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, we each lost like 15K.
Wasn't Dare buying up all the Full Tilt money at one point for like 70 or 30 cents? I don't know what the number is.
A lot of different people were. I feel like Marchese was buying a bunch. Maybe I'm just
that would make sense because Marchese is very sharp.
Yeah, but you had to be really liquid, man. Like they waited that out like 18 months, and even then it was like a slow drip. You know, it might have been closer to like 2.5 years before you got the full balance back.
I remember Marchese had a great thread back in the day where he played nosebleeds for a bit and he got kind of beat up. I think he lost some money to Patrick, and then he basically was like, I decided last month to challenge myself and just go back down to 5'10". And, you know, see how well I could do. And he just played a ton of hands and he grinded 5'10", crushed it for like 17 big blinds per 100. 10-20, same. 25. And he was like already back up to like 5,100 by the end. It was different times in the poker world for sure.
It really was. Where the hell was I going to go with that? Fuck. I lost my train of thought. Doesn't matter. But yeah, so, you know, for I guess today's generation, it would have been nice to have Landon here for this conversation. He's been a part of it in the past, but I was reading like through the thread that Poker News posted, and there's just like a whole collection of youth that like kind of just doesn't get it. Like they know the event happened, but it didn't directly impact them, and they have no frame of reference for what poker was like pre-Black Friday.
Landon was 12.
Right. He might have dabbled.
Yeah, it was so good back then.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, if you go back, I mean, this is 06 times, but if you go back and watch those old Tough Fish videos.
Tough Fish was so ahead of his time, man. Tough Fish would be the biggest thing in this fucking space right now.
He's amazing.
Fuck me to tears.
But if you go watch that, it's like Tough Fish obviously wasn't the best poker player on the planet. And he'd be sitting at a table with like 2 fish and like Empire Maker and then just 2 seats open. And he's playing 10-20.
Yeah.
And it's just the craziest shit you've ever seen.
Empire Maker
compared
is
to
J-Mo,
now.
right?
What?
Who is Empire Maker?
Empire Maker, what's his real name? He made like a fortune in sports betting and other stuff. He's really sharp.
Yeah. Oh no.
No.
He said a fortune, not lost a fortune.
He's very sharp. He actually, when Biden won the
he's Empire Maker too on Twitter, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
That makes sense.
When Biden won the presidency, he got hammered that night, and he just kept asking people to let him bet Biden when Trump was like a 5-1 favorite in the markets, because he understood, I guess, how the counts worked, and no one else seemed to. And he was taking money at like evens because he couldn't find enough action. And all of us like watching were probably like, what an idiot. He's just drunk and like he's just chasing losses and spewing off, and he was just right the whole time.
Yeah.
And the way he came off was like perfect because people just kept putting more money to him.
That feels like one of my more regrettable misses. I was in like a Vig Free chat during that time, and people were offering like really long odds on Biden. And for whatever reason, like I was getting good information, but it was coming from sources that I didn't like fully trust. And it was just like, why I can't, like, I feel like they're just feeding me information with their heart of like what the most optimistic outcome could possibly be, and how he still has a path to the White House. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to fucking bet, even if I'm getting 6 or 8 to 1 on that sort of thing. And then like, you know, within 2 hours, like the flip started to occur. And you're just watching it unravel in real time. You're like, God.
The Red Mirage. I remember like people talking about it before it actually happened, and I was probably definitely too drunk to take advantage of it. But I had like a bunch of money on Predict It, which is like Pauly Market, but just for you know, politics. And I just watched it like my balance, because I was like all in on Biden, and I just watched it go all the way down, and the site just crashed. You couldn't trade, you couldn't do anything. I'm like, fuck. Blacked out. Woke up at like 4 a.m, and it was all the way back up. I'm like, yes. What happened?
Yeah, I woke up in the morning and it was like it was like out of a movie. Like because I had a lot on Biden too. It's like the only political bet I've really ever made, and it was the biggest bet I've ever made by far. And I was just like, how do we lose this spot? And then I woke up in the morning It's like, oh my God. Like I also didn't, I mean, this is very fishy, but I didn't know how they ran out the counts. And so I just like shut down. It was like more money that I bet on anything outside of poker. And like, just, I knew I was going to just read so much like gloating from people that I don't think are that intelligent. And not saying that everyone on the other side wasn't intelligent, but the people that bugged me. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I just went and played pickleball at night with Mike for like 4 hours and didn't look at my phone. And then I just went to bed and I woke up in the morning. I was like, holy shit, I just found like a lot of money. It was insane.
Were you guys getting long odds coming up to the election? What was it?
No.
Biden was a favorite one almost.
Biden was a pretty big favorite coming in. It was like where you made all the money was after the results came pouring in, because they counted the in-person votes first and then the mail-in ballots, and the mail-in ballots were way heavily skewed towards Democrats, and all the in-person votes were skewed towards Trump. And like people were saying, like, listen, this is what's going to happen. Like the red mirage is going to come in. They're going to count all of the heavily Republican votes first. Trump's going to act like he won. He's going to come out and say he won. And then when all the votes catch up from the mail-in ballots, he's going to say it's rigged.
But what really happened, it was just a rigged election, right?
Yeah, well, according to some people,
I remember that.
A lot of dead people voted in that one.
Yeah, lots of dead people.
Shout out to
lots of illegal immigrants. All those people voted.
Don't worry, we're
getting voters cards.
We're in Trump's America now.
We're getting some voters cards.
Well, it was also funny because
the last laugh at the end.
The left were so sure this election that the same thing was going to happen, and they were dead wrong in that sense. Like they were like, oh, don't worry, like all these late votes that come in that get counted at the end are gonna save us.
I don't think there was real certainty behind that. I think it was more just this is what could happen. It was
definitely some copium by the end of it.
Yeah, I don't think very many intelligent people on the left were like really bullish on the notion that switching your candidate a few weeks out was going to lead to victory.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. Plus, like, it wasn't the same as 2020, right? The dynamics of the whole thing was different.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
No
like,
COVID.
No COVID. It wasn't all the mail-in ballots. And Republicans were using mail-in ballots.
The way you say mail is
mail-in ballots.
Mail-in ballots.
It's
melon ballots.
Melon ballots.
I can't tell
like melon bank.
I can't tell if he's saying melon or if he's like saying like malware,
like malpractice.
Malpractice.
Mail-in ballots.
How do you say crazy to me?
What is the other word for a boy?
Another word for a boy? Man.
Okay, another word for a man. The scientific term for a man.
Scientific term?
Or a female?
Or a woman.
What's a male.
A man.
What's another word for a duck?
A mallard. Mallard.
I mean,
we found
okay.
I got a lot of yinzer-isms in
That's
me.
fine.
We found
tell
his
me
special.
how you say it and how I'm saying it, so I can hear the difference.
Male.
Okay.
Versus mal.
Mal.
Or
you say mallard and male the same way.
Male is what? Male. Is
yes,
right?
yes.
Male. And I say mal.
Mal.
Interesting.
That's like my special.
Did you guys? Did you and Berkey grow up in different areas from each other?
Nope. Like about a mile away from each other.
I only asked this because I detected almost like a Delawarean type of accent out of you. I know that my mom's from Delaware.
He has a much thicker yinzer. He has a much thicker yinzer accent.
I do.
There are a few words that I can't remember. Somebody pointed one out in the comments the other day. They were like, I hate how you say this word. I go, it's a yinzer thing, man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to tell you. But we have bigger issues to address. So Zoom is apparently down.
It's
great.
It's up on my side.
He just sent me a screenshot that said Zoom is down for everyone.
Oh, okay.
The server is not responding.
Strong.
He said he'll keep trying. Do we have another method?
Is Discord
that
a
I could
possibility?
Discord. How about
Can't you just use like Google Hangouts or something?
Google Hangouts?
Google Hangouts could work. Yeah. Let me create a Hangout.
It's Skype. Fire up the old Skype app.
Skype's gone now, right?
Is it?
Every time I turn my computer back on, Skype seems to load up. Dude. Skype is like a cockroach, man. It will never. I never even downloaded it.
Skype dropped the ball so hard during COVID. They had it all. Like nobody even knew what Zoom was. Like Skype was like kind of like
they're going to be like Yahoo a little bit,
right?
Aren't they?
Like, but if they didn't take advantage of it, like Zoom did.
Very unfortunate.
Very, very unfortunate. But what are you gonna do? You win some, you lose some.
Have you ever said water instead of water?
No, that's a east.
That's a Jersey
That's
thing.
that's
New York.
Eastern
Water?
Pennsylvania,
That's Delaware.
Delaware.
I've never heard anyone
Yeah.
outside of Delaware
New
say
York.
that.
New York, they say water.
Yeah, New York.
New York.
Just go to
We
the
do not
They don't say
that.
water. They punch you in the face if you say water. in New
They
York.
say
What are you
water.
talking about? I'm drinking water.
See,
Yeah, he says no.
Water.
it's not as
People from
exaggerated.
Delaware say water. Like
Okay,
they don't.
Delaware.
They
I got to tell you,
Okay,
there's
no
all the
ambiguity
places
there.
of all the
There's
places
only like 5 people in Delaware.
of all the places, Delaware is the least egregious with the water.
no, they're not.
When
It's
you're
like Philly,
when you-
Jersey.
No.
When you live like where he lives, like on the whole right on the coast, they all think they sound different. To us, they all sound the same.
Okay, when you go to the Borgata, I can assure you that place is not full of Delawareans.
Right.
But you will hear everybody say, "Hey, yo, sweetheart, give me a water."
Yeah, but there's
Like,
that sounds
they're
good.
trying to say water, but people from Delaware legitimately think that it's water.
I don't
there's a
think
D in it?
anybody thinks it's spelled water.
I mean, my mom has no other accent, but she says water, and there's another word that she says.
They say dog.
No, she says
that's
dog.
Boston.
She's like dog.
No,
Dag.
Boston is dag.
Yeah, dag.
Dag. And in New York, it's dog.
Yeah, okay, fine. All right, let's get this train back on the fucking tracks. Jesus Christ.
Wait, can I say one more thing?
No. No, because like your one more thing is 16 minutes.
no, it's just my favorite thing that I ever heard from my buddy from Boston when Johnny Damon got traded to the Yankees. All summer, all I heard out of this kid was, fucking Johnny Damon broke my fucking heart.
All right, that was worth it.
Yeah.
All right, so as we try to get Dustin in here to discuss, the way that poker has marketed itself or lack thereof over the past, 15 years since Black Friday, it's impossible to ignore Black Friday's effect on all this, and I think it's a pretty good segue into it. So, obviously, with the execution of Black Friday came the loss of online marketing funds. And as those funds went away, we lost a lot of the, I guess, vehicle that was churning along poker throughout all that time. And what's kind of curious to me is that somehow the United States represented such a big piece of the pie that, effectively they stopped pouring in marketing dollars the way they previously had prior to exiting the States. Like Poker After Dark, High Stakes Poker, those two for sure, I'm positive, disappeared. I feel like the big game may have lasted a little bit post Black Friday.
Who was Poker After Dark and
Poker After Dark was Full Tilt. High Stakes Poker was both.
Okay.
So both companies were running commercials. Both companies were pouring money into the production. They were paying the players, all that stuff. I feel like they died post Black Friday. The big game by Stars may have continued for a little bit longer. Maybe Poker After Dark did too, but like by 2015, everything had disappeared.
Okay.
Right? Like maybe the only thing that still existed was the Premier League by Party Poker. And I'm not even certain of that. But it's curious to me that somehow the rest of the world that they could market to wasn't worth doing these televised productions. And, one of two things is true. Either the American market was that big, which very well could be the case, or television is pretty much mostly positioned in America. Like television distribution isn't big worldwide by comparison. But, when we talked about this the other day, I think we kind of didn't fully address how much of an impact Black Friday itself probably had in the trajectory in kind of bookending the moneymaker effect. We have this Black Swan event where an accountant from middle of nowhere Tennessee with the last goddamn name Moneymaker plays the literal movie definition of a professional gambler, and Sammy Farha heads up, cigarette dangling out of his mouth. He beats him, calling his bluff nonetheless.
I'm gonna call you weak, boy.
And great callback. And for 10 years everything is great, or 8 years I guess everything is great. Then Black Friday occurs, and it's like it becomes very apparent now where all of the dollars were being funneled into the community from. And it wasn't the World Series. It wasn't WPT. It wasn't these live venues or anything along those lines. It was these online operators. And what we're not sure of, or like what I'm not sure of, I suppose, is how much were the smaller operators pumping in marketing dollars? How much was UB, Absolute, the Doyle's Room?
I mean,
probably a lot more than they should have.
Absolute had Helmuth, correct? Or was that UB?
It was UB. They were sister skins.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were a lot of sites that saw the success of Stars and Full Tilt that were like, we need to replicate that, so we need to pump all this marketing dollars into the space, and then,
I feel like I remember seeing like UB commercials and stuff like that with Helmuth, and like I was not big into poker then at this time. But I do remember seeing this stuff.
You're probably right. But again, they were the third biggest site too. So, I guess Party Poker.
Party Poker was the third biggest.
Yeah.
Well, Party you're talking about Black Friday, yeah.
But even pre-Black Friday, Party was still probably the third biggest.
Yeah, UIEGA was about when?
2006.
Yeah, that was 2006. Before that, Party was the biggest site, right? And then they just sort of kept the decline because. But
that actually says a lot if. I'm speculating, but if they were still the third biggest site after leaving America, that really shows the stranglehold that Stars and Full Tilt had.
Yeah, but maybe they weren't. Maybe UB was.
UB might have surpassed them at that point.
Yeah, Absolute Poker was coming up too.
They were the same.
Either way, I feel like Stars and Full Tilt were very much on their own echelon, and then it was like way below as the next biggest site.
Yeah, that's for sure true. But in any event, like this chain of events that occurs obviously reshapes the landscape moving forward, and it alters greatly the way that things had been done will continue forward, right? So I think that there was this dark period between like 2012 and 2016 when Kerry started Poker Go, where there was really no poker production. Poker Night in America was a startup, I believe, in 2012, or maybe I think it was like late 2012, early 2013, maybe early 2013. Basing this off the blog post that I pulled up. So that started, 2 years after Black Friday. And if memory serves, there wasn't really anything else going on except for WPT and World Series. So World Series still had their contract with ESPN at the time. WPT, who knows what network they were on. They were always they started on the Travel Channel, but I couldn't name you what network they were on after that.
It was like High Stakes Poker was around.
Was it still post Black Friday?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like
who was funding
it was like the later episodes, but I feel like Galfon came on there kind of. Maybe he came on earlier than that. I thought he came on after Black Friday.
Mercier played when we were still at Mesa Verde, so that was for sure pre-Black Friday.
Wow, yeah, you might be right.
And Galfon was definitely before Mercier. I don't know who would fund it.
We need a timeline of
I just don't know who would fund it because Full Tilt and Stars were putting up like pretty much 100% of the budget. And I don't know why they would continue to do that in 2013, 2012, whatever.
So they weren't receiving money from the TV, whatever TV station they were on?
They had to buy the airtime.
Oh, okay.
It was the opposite. They didn't get paid to produce these shows for the television network. They bought the airtime.
Mm-hmm.
And then Full Tilt and Stars.
Is that still how things go?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. I think like CBS Sports pays Poker Go. I would assume anyway.
I would think so.
And that's probably why it's positioned at like, midnight on the West Coast.
Do we know why?
Because they're just buying it as filler.
Do we know why it was opposite previously?
Well, I think that if I'm guessing here, I'm speculating, but I would assume the networks didn't want anything to do with gambling or poker, but instead, what they were probably pitched on was, hey, we have these two major operators. They'll buy all the commercial airtime, and they'll pay a markup for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're also going to, give us a budget to produce the show. Okay. You can put it on for free.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it seems great.
Makes sense.
I went to pick up Thai food yesterday, and they had the World Poker Tour on their TV. And I wondered what channel that was on. It was actually their
now I think it's like
drop.
Fox Sports.
Fox Sports, like the affiliates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. You actually always see it on YouTube TV. Like
that too.
It's always playing on YouTube TV for some reason.
Yeah,
Whenever
for
I
sure.
look, it's on there.
Yeah.
But I wondered if, maybe they just had a smart TV and had YouTube playing. I imagine it was like some TV channel.
I mean, YouTube TV is like normal TV.
It's on all the bars. It's definitely Fox Sports.
It's probably Fox Sports, yeah.
It's definitely Fox Sports. All right. We are now fortunate enough to be joined by Dustin Iannotti. He's previously worked in the space, or currently works in the space, producing the one and only Mr. Keating's vlogs. He's previously been a part of Jason Somerville's Run It Up. That's where I first came in contact with him. I'll let him divulge the rest of his resume so I don't botch it, but welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I should let you know I have a little bit of a audio. I'm not hearing you guys super clear. It almost sounds like you're on a cell phone sitting 10 feet in another room. So I don't know if there's a way to fix that, but I can make do.
I mean, you look great. We've never used Google Hangouts, so
yeah, I get it. Yeah, it was wild. Zoom apparently is down for everyone and won't even let me log in.
Brutal. I guess go up, play around, see if you can fix the audio, but we'll try to power through if you don't mind.
Yeah. Let's roll.
Why don't you give everybody a little bit of a backstory, how you got into the space, what your previous projects were, and how you got to this point?
Absolutely, yeah. My first major project out of college, I actually moved. I moved to Vegas because I had fallen in love with poker. Honestly, it was either the moneymaker time, or it may have even been just like seeing a clip of Elix Powers. My roommate was a poker guy already, and he kind of got me into it in college. I moved here knowing that I wanted to play poker, but being realistic enough that it might not be the thing that is my primary source of funds, for me at least, because I wasn't very good. So I moved here and I ended up interning for Poker Royalty, which is Brian Balsba, who represents all of the kind of major guys, Negreanu, Helmuth, Esfandiari back in the day, and just kind of represents them kind of like in a sports agency capacity. So that was my first gig. Got to work a lot with Daniel when he launched a training site. I think it was Poker VT many years ago. I was working super close with him, and ultimately that led me to moving overseas for a while. So I've kind of been on all sides of this, because I did the corporate thing. I moved overseas to the Isle of Man, which I don't recommend if you're any sort of a foodie, because there's like 5 decent restaurants and they all serve the same thing. I worked for Stars for a while. When Stars bought Tilt, I moved over to Dublin and I managed Team Pro and celebrity marketing over there. So I worked a lot with Victor, Tom, and Gus. The Professionals is what it was called, and then ultimately came back to help launch Ultimate Poker in the first regulated online market here in the States. And all along the way, the primary kind of stuff that we were working on at all those companies was figuring out a different way to tell some of the players' stories from a marketing capacity. So the first kind of thing I ever did was actually with a guy, you guys may remember the Busto to Robusto series that was heavily kind of touted on 2+2 back in the day. Ryan Firpo, who ultimately went on to direct the Marvel's Eternals. Me and him worked together on a series of short docs while at Poker Stars about all the Team Online guys. So Nanonoko, things of that nature. So I've kind of always had my foothold in the idea of like telling these human interest pieces, because I just have always found poker players so fascinating. And did the same kind of thing at Tilt with Victor and Tom for the Isildur Challenge and things of that nature. And then ultimately, back at Ultimate Poker, we tried some reality show stuff. That site ultimately went under, and it was right around that time. I had signed Jason Somerville to be a part of Ultimate Poker, and we were trying to come up with something he could do that was like super unique in the space to kind of help grow his ambassadorship and promote himself. And the idea that we kind of collectively landed on was everybody at the time, Card Runners was super big, right? And maybe there was one other site. And the idea was, well, everybody's doing all this strategy content. What if we just give it all away for free? And that was kind of the advent of the idea for what ultimately became Twitch on poker and Jason. And, been doing stuff in poker through my own agency, Artisans on Fire, for the last 10 years or so. We actually just celebrated our 10-year anniversary.
Congrats on that. I mean, Jason, you built him into a star. He built himself into a star, however you want to frame it. It was unfortunate, the timing of COVID and him just having run its course, that he kind of left the space. But I do think that that's like a good jumping off. Oh, wait, by the way, before I do that, were you the mastermind behind the show with D Moon Girl and Dan O'Brien?
Yeah, I bet you. Or what do we call it? Me versus you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, fantastic
Yep.
content.
Yes.
Nothing greater than
Loved
seeing Dan O'Brien hanging upside down from
Appreciate that.
what the hell were those acrobatic like ribbons?
Yeah.
Yeah, least flexible person I've ever met in my life. you have a real eye for contact, Dustin.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, Antonio, I joked to him a couple years later because he made that show. I can't remember what network that was on with Phil a couple years later. And I was like, bro, you're betting my style, because Antonio is one of our ultimate pros as well. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. He was the big signing. I forgot about that. Man, UP. That was a fun time. Okay, so I guess like jumping into that, like Jason's a great example of a character that you did help cultivate, and he had a window of time where what he was doing was incredibly unique. As you kind of mentioned, it spiraled into building Twitch Poker. That entire platform took off. Underneath him, we saw a lot of the biggest streamers currently get their feet in the door. Lex, Spraggy, I'm not sure if Finton was a part of that or not, but I remember our studio was basically neighbors to his. He had this giant sort of like banners in his living room. You'd walk in and you just see Lex to the left and Spraggy to the right, and it was a whole production. He had a real eye for this, and he seemed to share a lot of your sentiments on the space, as did I. I don't know if you had a chance to see it or not, but I wrote a blog way back in 2013 on the state of affairs with Poker Night America entering the arena at the time. And I thought their idea was truly genius, like building the local characters and stuff like that. I don't want to get into the whole long and short of it, but I thought they ultimately failed pretty drastically. Like at the time, I remember it was impossible for me to get on the Pittsburgh show. It's like I'm literally the only professional to come out of Pittsburgh. So it just felt like they were missing the actual heart of what they were driving home. But why do you think? I guess. Why do you think that is? Why do you think this lack of storytelling exists in our space, this lack of character building? And like, what drove you to write this lengthy post on Twitter?
Yeah, I'll be honest. It stems from years of obviously a lot of the things I mentioned, up to the point where I worked with Jason and whatnot. I've kind of now shifted in my agency side to kind of consulting with a lot of these companies and coming up with whether it's short form or different types of things, helping out on various projects, from a TV production standpoint, or how to make some of the more TV production stuff fit into the modern poker landscape of social, TikTok and YouTube and things of that nature, shorts. So for me, I honestly, and I purposely created the kind of what I would call the hook of that post based on my own true frustrations, which is every time that I, and by the way, those guys are, still, active clients of mine, and I enjoy what we do together. But I always would go into those meetings and they say, what do you think is the most kind of, the biggest impact thing that you can do for us? And my answer has been the same for over a decade. And it's, we need to figure out a way to create the evolution of what poker looked like on ESPN in 2003. And, we just see it over and over again. Obviously, I saw I watched your episode last week where you talked about Drive to Survive. Ironically, you and I share the same affinity for the tennis one, Breakpoint, which in my opinion is far superior from a cinematic storytelling standpoint. I have some interesting kind of stats I could bring up about that one versus Full Swing and Formula One as well. But for me, I've always walked into those meetings and I've kind of said, this is the stuff that needs to happen. These hands, there's only so many ways that you can, tell the story of aces versus kings. And I get it. Like the stakes matter and all that matters. And it's so true. Like it's obviously I'm a poker nerd. So that stuff all interests me, but it isn't ever going to bring new eyes to the audience because there is, while it's not as bad as chess, like sitting down at a chess game, you're probably a 0% to win against somebody that has played before. Poker, sure, we know you can eke it out. But the bottom line is like, we need to tell the stories. The stories are just absolutely paramount in all sports to what makes us really stick around for the long term. And poker, I don't think, has ever been given the proper chance. And I think some of it, and I know it's going to sound controversial and probably get me in trouble. You know, obviously there was a lot of positive comments on the thread, but I've heard from some people, you know, that didn't necessarily want to be public about it. And, you know, we had some fun, you know, really great debates, honestly, with friends I respect. And there's a lot of good people at those companies, but the problem is there seems to be a lack of willingness to kind of take enough of a chance to give those types of projects a real shot to shine, meaning they either want to, you know, if you know of the iron triangle in marketing, what we always say is, you know, fast, cheap, and good, you can pick two. Yeah. I always feel like they're trying to either have all three, or they're limiting you so much in one or two of the others that it's impossible to get, you know, to get it over the line in a way that either feels like, you know, where is our Netflix quality show? Meaning, who is funding that? Who is renting the same cameras that are Netflix approved? Which, you know, there's a certain approval process. They don't allow any show to be shot on any camera on Netflix, right? And same for the other streaming networks. There's standards that are well above what, you know, you and I can go and buy like a consumer brand camera for the most part. Where is the shot where it's like, we're going to invest in the cameras, invest in the right crew, invest in bringing in better storytellers, and really take our time with this, so we're not rushing it to meet a certain deadline that we think is important. I think there's a lack of all of those things, and until somebody finally brings it all together in one thing, we don't really ever get our real shot in the poker space of having that opportunity to tell those stories in the way that I talk to guys like you and guys, you know, like Tristan Foxen all the time, and like the stories are infinitely interesting if we could just tell them the right way with the right quality.
Isn't like wouldn't what Kerry tried to create with PokerGo be that particular media house, so to speak? And isn't the fact that he's not doing it kind of symbolic of it not being a money-making opportunity?
You cut out there, Matt. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was basically saying, like, isn't Kerry's idea of what he's doing at PokerGo and the fact that he's not executing on it in this capacity kind of symbolic of it not being a real money-making opportunity?
I don't think so. And the reason why is my belief is PokerGo serves an absolute niche audience that, you know, people like us, you know, I subscribed probably first couple weeks that PokerGo was around. And in fact, I even had conversations with the guys that were running it back in the day, probably around the same time that you were when you came out with some of your docs and creating some sort of long form, different type of content. There was actually a show we actually filmed a pilot for with Ryan Furbo that I mentioned earlier that was meant to kind of be our Silicon Valley, you know, the HBO Silicon Valley for poker. Revolving around a female version of Durr, basically. And so, no, I think that Kerry made that attempt. The problem with the overall kind of business model there is you have to be a niche of a niche of a niche to end up seeing most of that content because it's gatekept, right? So you have to already be interested in poker enough that you're going to pay for a subscription to only watch more poker. And then you have to find, well, of that niche, which of these people might be interested in, say, you know, a dating show or a long form show. Like, and it just becomes, you know, fragmented to the point where you're getting down deep so that the audience you finally find there is just too small. Like the distribution for that type of programming, it's too big a risk. And, you know, to be honest, they've taken them. I've seen they've invested in docs and different types of shows that you wouldn't normally expect, like on a poker only streaming network. And it didn't work. And I think part of that reason is because you're gatekeeping them, you know, at the forefront by even the name of the streaming network, right? Like, you know, so you have to be super interested in poker. And then, you know, you have to hope that they're interested in this other thing. For us, I think it needs to be the opposite. We need to almost create a show where poker is clearly an important and core focus of the characters we're following, but it's almost an afterthought until we have educated and built that world enough that they care. I'll give you a perfect example, actually, and the Masters just happening is kind of good timing for this. I watch Full Swing on Netflix, and I love the show. You could not have paid me enough to watch the Masters from beginning to end 5 years ago, 4 years ago, until Full Swing came out, I had 0 interest in golf. I thought it's the most boring sport in the world. And then I, watch Full Swing season 1, and I learn about Justin Thomas, and I see the clips of Rory, and I see these different guys. And now I'm rooting for them because I know, one of them feels like they're in a slump and they were thinking about quitting the game. And, one of them found newfound fame, and then all of a sudden they can't figure out how to balance that with their family life. And all that stuff is infinitely interesting. Now I'm watching the Masters this weekend, and I know all the guys from the show, and those are the guys I'm rooting for. And if they all got eliminated, I probably wouldn't finish the Masters. But the point is, it got me there, and I never would have been there otherwise. And to me, that's the opposite of what Poker Go kind of is for people, right? It's you happen to find a show that is interesting, whether poker is involved or not, and it just happens to also contain elements of poker. I think we need that.
I had the same experience with Breakpoint, except I was a big tennis fan when I was a kid. And then I had about 8 years where I stopped watching tennis, and then Breakpoint came out, and I just got immersed in the characters again, and now I'm following it pretty closely.
Yeah, I think it's a point well taken. We've seen this template utilized time and time again. Lamanna can speak to it as the house husband of fellow Bravo watcher. But, a lot of those reality shows, they don't even have a vehicle. Like, at least we have the vehicle of poker here to drive the storyline along. A lot of those Bravo shows are just like, this person is famous for some scrupulous reason that isn't really all important. And she has other friends that are now going to become famous because they're part of her little clique. And I'm going to watch the whole fucking thing unfold.
So good.
When you take that now to the male side of things, where, Breakpoint and Full Swing, I think, are great examples, especially in today's social landscape where social media is really tearing down the curtain that used to exist between celebrity status and everyday people. There's way more interaction than you've ever seen. I know way more about superstar athletes now, like, to a fault. I don't need to know as much about LeBron as I know, but to that end, there's a lot to build off of that. And you're right. It's a big hook.
I think the answer to your question about why, if Poker Go isn't doing it correctly, then why it would be a good idea is really
money,
strong. The answer you just delivered.
Money. Yeah.
Well, I think the fact that it's behind a paywall is a really good answer, because you just literally can't bring new people into the game if you put it behind a paywall. Nobody's paying for Poker Go unless they're already obsessed with poker.
A paywall that's specific to just poker.
Yeah, and it's like you can make the argument like, okay, well, there have been some good documentaries on YouTube already, but it's a lot different, right? Like when you have something that's as well done as Breakpoint,
right,
and you put it on a streaming platform, I think that's a big difference than having like some kind of organically created low budget documentary on YouTube.
Let me pull up that thread a little bit, and I'll bring you back in here, Dustin. I'm interested because this was what I really harped on when we talked about this last week, is that I think the distribution is where the failure actually occurs here. We've seen our flagship event, the main event, get stuffed behind the paywall for all of the quote-unquote coverage that really matters. They do a lot of teasing on YouTube, and sure, the produced version comes out months later on, I guess, CBS Sports. I don't even know. But it's not what it used to be. The internet is the internet now. People are getting real-time updates. It's not like back when we were coming up in 2003, where we showed up every Tuesday to play a home game at our buddy's house and sweat the coverage. It's a very 24-hour news cycle now. The stream is very important. Even being able to churn out the produced episodes in far less, like creating less latency between the day that it's streamed and the day that the production or the produced show comes out, I think would be a big one. But where I'm going with this is we fail so hard at the distribution side because, as you mentioned, we don't have anything on cable network really that is in prime time. We don't have anything on the major streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, etc. But we do have a very robust corner of the YouTube space. And I'm interested in your thoughts as to why that particular platform is underperforming so drastically comparatively to something like chess, which we have to assume prior to Queen's Gambit and COVID probably had a comparable community to poker.
Yes, 100%. I just want to clarify your question one more time?
Yep. I was just basically asking, like, why do you think we underperformed so drastically on the YouTube space, in spite of the fact that there's so much content being poured out?
Understood. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if you're talking about comparing it to chess or some other niche industries, I mean, you know, a good example, there's a employee of mine that's super into like Formula One and all this stuff, and then he turned me on to the idea, and you know, he actually talked to me, brought me the idea of, you know, maybe we should go tell some stories in Formula Drift, because that's like a whole different genre. It's a bit more risky. It's a bit more kind of rugged and gritty, and you know, but they don't have a very large following. So I think a lot of it has to do with, and I know you talked about this in last week's episode, and maybe you mentioned it to me in the Twitter discussion as well, but it's a bit of a chicken and the egg, right? Like, until chess had that kind of Queen's Gambit moment, you know, they were, you know, chess.com was doing things right, and they had recently gotten bought out by somebody else who brought in a team of, you know, excellent storytellers, in my opinion, and not just excellent storytellers, but excellent at understanding how the algorithm works. And they played a lot of the way that they framed their pieces. You know, Alex Botez from chess, right? Great example. She is a great chess player, and she creates content, and it's certainly surrounds chess, but chess is not the sole focal point of that content, and it's more like gaming the algorithm a bit, and like, what do I do to satisfy the algorithm first, and then introduce the ideas that, you know, surround, you know, ancillary, you know, in ancillary ways, the chess. I think poker, we haven't always hit that same mark, and that's kind of why, and I'm interested to see if it continues, of course, if we can break out with Alan's channel, but we haven't ever gone the way of like, let's fully, again, game it for storytelling first, poker almost in a bit of a way the backdrop, which, you know, some of the episodes Alan is doing just because so many people are interested in, you know, these kind of rivalries. To his credit, he had a vision for kind of, you know, telling that story, you know, on YouTube. But for me, I think we're still not necessarily doing it in the reverse. I think we're still leaning too much, you know, listen, I like a lot of the content, you know, Wolfgang puts out. I actually met him and spent quite a bit of time with him over the World Series in Paradise this year. And same with Brad Owen and guys of that nature. But to me, the Wolfgang version of that is kind of like, it's poker on crack, right? Like, it's poker, you know, made for the social audience. And then, you know, Brad is definitely, you know, more along the lines of a poker journey. And again, we're still talking poker first. I think that we need to instead, you know, focus on the aspects of what is the psychological effects of Wolfgang, you know, becoming famous, or what is the what is the aspect of Brad when he goes on a down streak, and like but not make it about like, I gotta poker my way out. It's like, what really happens? Like, how am I dealing with this, you know, from a personal standpoint? How is it affecting my relationship? Like, I do think that in order to care more deeply about people, and even, you know, from a vlog perspective, Logan Paul, who I know is a very polarizing character, he's done that, right? Because he brought us into his little family feud, and then he's brought us into, you know, him getting fame and kind of really becoming a bit of a jerk and dealing with that, and then the aspects of how to handle being canceled. And again, all that stuff is dramatic storytelling. And then there are people that hate him, but they still watch. They hate watch, and then there are people that love him because they're bought into his story. They've kind of watched him grow up. I don't really feel we've ever kind of steered a story like that in poker. I don't think we have, personally. And if you guys have examples to show otherwise, I want to watch them.
What do you think about Frankie's vlog? Have you ever seen Frankie C's vlog? Frankie C?
I think Frankie, I think Frankie's doing a lot of stuff right. I actually think Frankie, for me, is one of the, and I shot with him at a North American Poker Tour last year, and I recall him saying the line, I don't know if it was on camera or off, maybe this is, I don't watch all of his episodes, so I'm not positive he said this publicly, but he said, you know, my ultimate kind of mission statement is to become the Mr. Beast of poker, and, you know, I'm going to do that. And to me, he's well on his way. I really do. I think he's incorporated his personal life. I think that, to be honest, if I was to pick, other than Alan, and maybe I'm biased, of a person that currently has the best shot of kind of breaking out and turning this into more, would be Frankie C.
Yeah, it's interesting because I see them very differently. Like, I agree with you. Yeah. I've known Frankie since he was a part of Next Gen, and they were just blowing up in the short scene. And I do agree. I think both the way he's approaching it, and then I think just Alan as a character, both have mass appeal to them. But I think it creates something very different. I think Frankie pulls in a young audience that isn't that interested in poker or gambling, whereas Alan speaks very much to a competitive, male-dominated audience that is specifically interested in the high lifestyle.
That's true. Yeah. Well, to be fair, though, yeah, and I think, and as you'll see as the season goes on, and it'll actually be a really good battle test for us. One episode that has come out thus far being the episode of How He Flew to the Hamptons, being a kind of a hybrid version of what the hope is for Alan's vision to expand this. But it's the high roller lifestyle. It's not necessarily only the poker lifestyle. Now, some of the episodes solely focused on his battle with Peter in high stakes has leaned, clearly with more of a tilt towards poker and just trying to storytell it in a bit of a different way narratively. But the future episodes are going to be far more akin to the one with the Hamptons, which was more, he's living this jet setter, almost playboy lifestyle. And in many ways that suits him, but in many ways it kind of doesn't. And that's from the perspective of, him allowing himself to be more vulnerable on camera and let you into sides you haven't necessarily seen before, or that you wouldn't maybe expect someone that has this kind of reputation for being so mysterious to kind of share. That hasn't come out in some of the episodes yet, but stay tuned. It is coming soon. And I think that will add a lot of the dimension I'm talking about to his kind of his story and his character, and make people hopefully resonate with him far outside of poker. That's the goal anyway, which we're shooting for. But we did, we were very strategic and cognizant about, when Alan and I, were introduced, which, the guy I mentioned earlier, my former boss, Brian Ballsby, introduced us because Alan came to him and said, I want to, tell these stories about my life, and, I need to find, someone to help me do that. And that's why we were introduced. And, Alan, when he was in here, he was just kind of speaking music to my ears, because he said a lot of the things that I said in that tweet about what his vision was for himself. And, that's why I think it's made a good pair. But, the main thing that we both kind of recognized in some of those conversations was, but if we only do this one-dimensional thing where, I'm expected to be this mysterious guy that shows up and lives this high roller lifestyle, it's going to peter out at some point, because you can only watch that, high roller porn for so long before it's like, all right, now I've seen it. What's next? So yeah, I do think that there's, I do think there's a way for Alan to break out of the poker stuff. But, I left my point out. My point is, in the beginning, we were cognizant of the fact, though, in order to bring in the audience that we know without the shadow of a doubt to kind of formulate a base is, of course, the people interested in Alan playing these high stakes games. So that's what we kind of led mostly with. But going into future seasons, I imagine you will see less and less of that as time goes on, unless, there's some very, $1 million game, for example, something that is of, major substance and major kind of impact on his life, in which case we'll still try to tell it differently, but it will, bring the poker back.
So I'm interested what the solution is then in your eyes for all of this. Obviously, we've put a big emphasis on character development, and I do agree with you wholeheartedly there. But, for instance, when I started Solve for Why, that was a big part of the vision, was that these stories aren't being told. We're not capitalizing on these organic moments that just formulate themselves throughout one's career or throughout the collective space of poker. And
yes,
I'm very lucky that I was friends with a production company, Pigtails Production. They worked on the Final Table doc way back in 2012 with Russell Thomas, prepping with Jason for the main event Final Table. And they didn't really know poker, so that was a great aspect of it. They were super into the storytelling. They knew what was a hook and what wasn't, because they weren't interested in the game all that much to begin with. But the roadblock we continually ran into was amplification. It just became impossible to find distribution that either wasn't stuffed behind a paywall or wasn't suppressed by the algorithm. And I'm curious, if you had your way, if all things were greenlit go, what is the piece of content that you create that becomes our Queen's Gambit, and where does it live?
I wish it were, obviously, I got a lot of flack for my tweet already being too long, but I could have went on for much longer, and I actually edited it down by approximately 50% before I released it, if you could believe that. But no, I wish it were simple enough that it's a one prong, like, okay, tell the good story, make it our Queen's Gambit. It's not like that. For me, it's a multi-prong approach over multiple years, but I don't think that I think we've taken the first step, and we took that step maybe in 2003, 2004, and we've been maybe one or two steps ahead since then, but we need to figure out a way to start running. And what I mean by that, as you even mentioned, your kind of catalog of content, solve for why, right? To me, I see you, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, you're trying to do maybe a mixture of like the Pat McAfee and the Barstool Sports model, right? Because poker had all these people that were writing articles, but they were articles that were mainly just telling the results of the tournament, or they were maybe doing an interview here and there after a player won. But like, you and I know, like, being around these psychopath gamblers long enough, like, there's so many rich stories that just don't see the light of day. And, your ability to, have a time a week podcast or show kind of, that's what the Pat McAfee became successful, because he gets Aaron Rodgers on, and Aaron Rodgers used to talking about how he, spirals of football, and he's asking about conspiracy theories. And then all of a sudden, it takes us down a whole different road where it's like, oh shit, like I didn't know that about Aaron Rodgers. Now I got to learn more about that. And to me, that's what you guys do. So that's vital, right? Because creating or rather erasing, or at least more illuminating, why there should not necessarily be a stigma in poker for various reasons, some being that these guys, honestly, if you were to boil it down, one thing that I think we can all agree on is that poker players have a unhealthy relationship, or, depending on who you ask, healthier relationship with their ability to take on risk and high stakes decision making. And when you break it down to the core, now it's not about poker anymore. That's something that some people aspire to, some people don't understand, which is probably why the Red Bull, stunts that those guys do, jumping out of, spacecrafts and, flying, 5,000 feet to the ground or whatever it is infinitely interesting, right? Because the element of risk in a way, or parkour like that, people wouldn't take. Well, that's interesting. Now we have that in poker, right? So when you boil it down to these pieces, what do we, we have that part of the story, right? But then we do need our Queen's Gambit. And how do we get that, right now with the lack of distribution? My thing is there's two ways to do that. You need more shots on goal, which means you despite, you get the right cameras, you figure out a way, you claw your way to whatever investment you can. And a perfect example, and, there will be, I believe, more information coming out about this by the end of the week, something I'm working on. You can do one of two things if you're in the content creator space. You can find a way to get the investment you need to make the exact quality product you want, or part of the iron triangle again, or you could be willing to take the risk on yourself, make less money on this first project than you would, just for the ability to give me something to tell the story I've wanted to tell, and give me the time to actually tell it in the right way, and then get shots on goal. Then make something that is potentially Netflix approved, or is potentially, Apple streaming network approved. And if that show doesn't work out, well, maybe we didn't hit far enough. Perfect example of that, Game of Gold, I thought, was a phenomenal show, and it was absolutely steps in the right direction, right? I think it was still too much poker. I do, and
way too much.
I'm friends with all those guys, but at the end of the day, I believe that show was a poker game show, and I think that the goal, I imagine, was to create a game show that contained poker. And I think unfortunately, I don't think it hit the game show that contained poker element. I think it was a poker show that, had elements of game show. So it was the opposite. So I think we need go ahead.
I was just going to say, I spoke at length with Spunky about that, and he was actually really receptive to a lot of the notes that I gave, and they were very similar to what you're saying. It was you guys nailed it in the framework of the idea, and you absolutely missed the mark in the execution. Like, we don't need a 30-minute episode of a heads up, sit and go. It's crazy. The general 100%. Audience doesn't care.
It's like I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Challenge, right?
Yeah, of course.
But like it's kind of the same thing where, like, the challenge is like they're almost like they're too long sometimes and they're boring. Like the most interesting part of that show is the drama in between and how they're
100%.
positioning each other to like take one person down.
Show the strategy, don't show the actual.
And then just
event.
have like the end where like someone gets eliminated. That's obviously interesting, but like. I'll watch it, and sometimes the challenge will just be too long. I'll be like, all right, get this over with. I need to see what else is going to happen.
Yeah.
Right, and that's how Game of Gold was like that.
100%. And I want to speak, because you mentioned Spunky. 100%. I know that he is so receptive. He's probably a person I talk and share the most creative kind of similarities with, because he knows all that stuff. And the great thing about that is there will be another shot at Game of Gold, I imagine, sometime in the future, because it was very well received. And I know that those notes will be taken in, and that next iteration, it could be the one, right? Like it could be the one that breaks through, because I believe it has all the elements to be successful. And it's more shots on goal like that. So whether it's the documentary or it's somebody writing a script and they're taking their shots, and maybe it's not, maybe we don't get it on Netflix. Maybe that's too lofty a goal. Maybe we need to find Peacock, or maybe we need to find whatever the what is it, Pluto or whatever it is, or Tubi, and we need to say, hey, you guys need to take a shot at this stuff. I know you need content. I haven't seen a poker human interest related story or a game show that has all the elements of poker, but all the tension of a normal game show concept like Survivor. And eventually we're gonna break one of those through, and we're going to have somewhat of an outsized result, I imagine, if it was done correctly. And then somebody's say, oh wow, maybe we should move that show from Tubi to Peacock, and maybe we should move it from Discovery to whatever it is. And I think we need those shots on goal, and I know that eventually we'll get there. I mean, there's so many. I heard you say this, I think, on the last broadcast, but there's so many dating shows on Netflix, and there's so many shows that be on Bravo that are quite honestly, difficult, I think, for a lot of us to watch, but they got there,
Speak for yourself.
Because there is an audience for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if it's a question of rising tides raise all boats type of thing. And if so, how do we, and when I say we, I guess I'm speaking more to those of us who care a lot about this stuff. How do we unify better and show more intrinsic support throughout the community to ensure that, like, when Brad puts out a blog, that will then raise the profile of Wolfgang Shorts, which will then raise the profile of the Only Friends podcast, which will then raise the profile of Keating's vlog. You know what I mean? Like, how do we gel and unify so that when somebody finally does hit a home run, there's a lot of ancillary content for whoever takes a shot on it to look at?
100%. I wish I had the perfect answer. I have an idealistic one, but then I also have one that I think is more rooted in successes I've seen in the past in other genres. Right, like you bring about an interesting question, especially from let's talk about YouTube alone for a second, right? Because to me, in a lot of ways, content creators, because of the market being so saturated, has it harder than they've ever had it before. Yet at the same time, there's also the ability to decide what story you tell on what day, right? Like if Frankie doesn't want to tell this particular story and he wants to go in a different direction for his narrative, he can do that. And nobody, there might be 10 other things going on in his life that other people may find more interesting, but if he wants to go in this direction, he can, right? So there's elements of, opportunity and, kind of weakness in that set. But to me, I look at, if you're familiar with MCNs, multi-content networks, I believe it was called, they had a big heyday, I want to say, a decade ago in many other genres where they were, exactly what you're mentioning. A bunch of vlogs were, basically helping prop each other up. They were appearing on each other's shows. They were talking about the other concepts. So if you're interested in math, you're going to want to go to this channel. But if you like science, this is my buddy. And you got to go see this. So to me, why isn't there kind of a multi-content network, or at least an unspoken one where you're right? Like we are propping each other up and you're, maybe it's as simple as like, every week I want to feature 2 great pieces of content I saw in poker that have absolutely nothing to do with me. And I'm not looking to profit. There is no affiliate deal here. These guys did something great, and I need you guys to go check it out. If you support me, I want you to support them. And maybe if 100 of us in the community do that, there would be a little bit of a groundswell, right? And that's option one. And I think, the more idealistic idea could be organizing something like that, which is, in my head, when I was, finally hitting upload on that tweet, I had this vision right as I was sending it, like, maybe this leads to something where all the people, and by the way, I did not expect the amount of response that I received, but to me, it was very uplifting to see it resonated with that many people. As I hit upload, I said, what if we did, the results of this are the people that actually give a shit enough to respond to me, create some sort of a collective, and, we put some sort of a community around the idea that we're going to just commit to promoting each other, promoting our stuff, maybe even, hey, I know a guy that's willing to invest a little bit in a project like this. Okay, cool. Oh, actually, I know 3 guys. Okay, well, let's collectively get together and say, how can you help out on this project? How can we support? How could we become, a crew of combined people that share this same kind of goal, and, make something really good? Rent the right cameras, get the right producer, get the right access to the people that we don't have access to, and then maybe even somebody. Great example. There's obviously guys in the community that play poker that have Hollywood connections. Maybe we say, hey, you've been down this road before. Do you think you can get us in to at least have a conversation about what we've just created, if it's good enough? I think stuff like that. I think, but WWE, I've watched for a long time, and I know, depending on how you feel about it or whatever, but if you know the history, WWE actually faced a lot of the same things. They came out, everyone hated that it was fake. They didn't want to treat it as a real sport. There was this stigma that was all like hillbillies and, lower class people that were watching and participating as the wrestlers themselves, and they were hustlers and carnival acts. And over time, what Vince McMahon, did was he said, well, I'm going to bring a major celebrity in, and I'm going to have him participate and show people a guy at the top of that industry thinks this is cool. So what do you think? And then all of a sudden that changed some perspective. And then he started his own, kind of content network and magazine, because it was like actually very similar to what you guys are doing, in my opinion. Let's tell the stories that aren't being told that deserve to be told. And then that edged him in the right direction, right? And then ultimately it got to a place where wrestling went from being this fake thing, nobody really wants to talk about it, not being a sport, to now he rebranded it, and it's not a sport, it's not entertainment, and it's not a sport, it's sports entertainment, and it's its own genre. And then all of a sudden that broke out, and now they're on Netflix, right? But they didn't start Netflix. They were on USA Network and Spike TV and places that, right now, you wouldn't imagine like, oh, a thing with all those ratings, they started on those networks. We need to follow the same path. I think we need to follow the same path, and it's a multi-part thing. End the stigma, create better stories, invest in better production, and support each other to the point that you're making. And I think all of those things combined, if we chip away at that in a way where we're really pursuing this over multiple years and kind of do have this, whether it's unspoken or not, some sort of a collective to help one another rise, somebody's going to break through. And then my hope is it rises everybody else. Because we need to create, I heard you say this on your podcast last week, right now the pie is such that, and I mentioned in the tweet, like there's, a recycled 250,000 or so on average, people that watch all of this different content for various different reasons, some's podcasts, some strategy, whatever. And we need to grow that pie first in order to make, some of this stuff more worthwhile for all of us. So in order to do that, we have to find a way to break through. So, yeah,
I really I agree with you in a lot of ways on this, both from the player side as well as the consumer side, as well as somebody who has operated in the business space and is very interested in this sort of angle. I don't know, man. I just have to me, we lost a big opportunity because I think Jason was way ahead of his time. I think that this is what he was trying to build with Run It Up. He was effectively bringing in and training up new streamers, new vloggers, getting people out there in mass. And, it seemed as though it was in alignment to eventually break through and become just an overall production house. The issue was always, and I don't want to speak for him, but I assume the issue is always funding. The issue is always distribution. Those two roadblocks become very, very challenging. But I think now now the timing is a lot more ripe because it's so much clear from other spaces. Like the dust is kind of settled. YouTube's not new anymore. Netflix isn't mailing out DVDs. Like it's a lot more clear the direction that digital content is moving in my opinion. And there are examples in other spaces of people who have already done a pretty good job of this. You mentioned the Paul brothers. Like that's a great starting platform. Like they have an entire platform. It's not just a podcast. It's not just a fighter and a YouTube. You know what I mean? Like they have all corners covered of the media space. And I really do think that everything is due for a makeover. Live streaming poker is still relatively new, but it's already stale. That's an arena where it's like, that's our, and I don't mean to say it this way, but that's our cheapest, most robust content, right? That's the $3 burger on the menu to get somebody to buy something more expensive, the loss leader, if you will. And then we have all this other wonderful content that's being produced, all these other content creators that all have their own niche. But the problem is that it feels like there's such a huge disconnect between the operators who have more disposable income than any of us combined that should want to invest in this, and then the creatives who are all just going out there and firing independently because there is some path to monetization, albeit the ceiling's relatively low. And I wonder if GG is ultimately going to be the bridge between the two. We're seeing them kind of like sweep the space and just buy everything up. I wonder if in the next 2 to 3 years, they have a similar idea as to what Carrie did with PokerGo, but they have a bigger vision for it where it is not stuff behind a paywall and it's not meant to appease the people that are already in the space, but rather as a loss leader to bring new people in.
Do you think with Game of Gold that's their attempt at doing so, like their start to do so?
I think they fire from the hip a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's a good example of going in that direction. That's a much more mass audience type of piece of content, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, because I obviously have relationships with these sites from a lot of the work that I'm currently doing with my agency, GG and WSOP being a couple of them, and I do think that there are pressures they face as well, which cannot be understated. And I actually see both sides. At the same time, I agree with what you just said wholeheartedly, and I'll explain what I mean on both sides. I believe that the pressures they have from an operator's standpoint, meaning they're always serving different masters inside of the company, right? And ultimately, somebody has to say, which one are you serving now? With them taking over the World Series, I know from speaking with them that they do have a very grand and very long-term vision. And I'm actually more hopeful than I've really ever been, because they don't operate, despite being a very successful, very large company. I would not classify them as operating like a bureaucratic company or a overly corporate company. If anything, that could be to their detriment in some ways. I think they operate like a startup, and they have a startup mindset, which in some ways means we need to find a way to create content and be lean and create different things, and operationally, make sure we protect the dollars and make it cheaper than it used to be made with all the new cameras and abilities and all that stuff. And I get that from the operator side. On the other side, I do completely agree that per the chicken and the egg, if there's going to be a potential disposable income that is going to say, let's take a shot at these 3 to 5 projects, and if 4 of them fail and 1 of them wins, that's a huge win for us because it grows the ultimate pie for the industry. I think that obviously operators have to participate in that and be willing to say, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try it anyway. And that is honestly part of the frustration for why I put the post out, because I do believe that they have the ability to do so. They believe and trust in many creators that are out there that they're working with, behind the scenes and at the forefront via sponsors or whatever it is. They just need to pull the trigger, and they I get being selective about it, but at the same time, they know as well as, us having this conversation that it isn't going to move forward unless they do something like that, where they invest in a project that is so non-clear whether it was created by Netflix and their production company versus somebody and they funded it. Like, they need to make the distinction so small that Netflix or a streaming network like Netflix can't help but say, yeah, this would look perfect right alongside our other catalog of content. So I do think that it is their responsibility to at least participate, if not, obviously, of course, lead the way. And I think they will. And I'm not only speaking of WSOP and GG. I know a lot of very smart people at the other, some of the other major sites that you could probably imagine who they are as well, that are fighting this battle inside. The problem is sometimes, in bureaucracy and corporate environments, the more cooks in the kitchen, nobody eats, right? Because the funding ultimately gets trapped one side or the other. I do think there's people fighting that fight and have been for a while. And I do think, content creators have honestly helped probably move that conversation more on the side of maybe we should start taking more risks like this. I just hope it happens faster than not, because I do think that now is the time, right? Like with all these great creators and all these stories, like I think we need to do it now while, before Drive to Survive goes out of style, if that's to happen, before we move on to the next thing, let poker have this thing.
I think that's well said. Whether it begins with or ends with the World Series main event, I think that's always going to be the lowest hanging fruit and the biggest opportunity that we have in the space. And the fact that GG now owns that, post this World Series coming up, could be a clear indicator that maybe more resources will be poured into that area. I know you got a hard out with a meeting coming up. Any of you guys have anything you want to ask Dustin? I know I've been taking over a lot of this.
So what do you think exactly is like the future of, what do you think will get poker seen by most people? Do you think like interest stories is the main key to everything here? Like personalities and stuff like that? Like
effectively, is there actual poker being played? Do you think that will draw people in the way that like you got drawn into the Masters?
Some may disagree. I would say it's one of two things that are most likely to be the case. One is human interest style stuff, and I actually point to, some people say, well, Negreanu and Phil, they were, our big guys, and they're still our big guys. But I mean, would that, necessarily fully appeal to like a younger audience if they were to watch now? And my answer to that, we've talked a lot about Drive to Survive and Full Swing. I look at Last Chance U and the cheerleading show, which I can't remember what it was called, but I use these Netflix examples because I imagine most people have probably seen these, served to them. But there was a show, Last Chance U, about basically guys that couldn't make it, whether it be academically or financially, into a major Division I football school. So they followed junior colleges where the kids go to hopefully get talented and skilled enough that they can then move on, year 2, year 3 into a D1 school and get seen, by the NFL or get, a scholarship, whatever it is. But all those characters, total unknowns. Nobody knows who they are. There is no Daniel, no Phil, no, Rory McIlroy, whatever it is, to kind of prop that show up. And that show was, I don't know how many seasons it ran, but that show was one of the most popular shows on Netflix for multiple years in a row. And then the same thing with cheerleading, which if we were to look up, and I did, the comparison between, how popular cheerleading versus poker is in terms of competitions and ancillary businesses supplementing and propping up that industry, it's not even close. Poker dwarfs it. But the reason that show was successful is because of the stories. So I do personally think human interest has to be at the forefront and number one, because whether it's a big name or not, if you find the right story and you tell the right version of it, it will break through. The secondary thing is more what we talked about with the Game of Gold stuff. I think, there's a reason Survivor and Big Brother are still on the air today, because at the end of the day, people are ultimately looking for these type of competition shows that have a different tilt on it. And I think that poker needs its Survivor moment. And I actually think that there's a lot of parallels, that enable us to create a game like that will break through. And the reason that makes so much sense to me is because, again, you watch Survivor, it's a skill game, right? Like, honestly, it's a skill/social game. And there's a lot of elements to it. It's very, robust in its psychology. Poker's the exact same way. So when we find our version of how to create that for the mainstream and not worry so much about what the hand percentages is in order to get us to the end of the competition, it's more about the elements and aspects of poker. But the challenges, like you were mentioning earlier, are far more, skewed towards the mainstream. I think that could do it too. So I would put my money on those two things, but I do think it's collective of a bunch of different things.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think we need all of the content. You still need games to be played and televised. It's just a matter of, are live streams better than produced? Can we get produced out to mainstream? Things of that nature.
Exactly.
But the one thing we didn't really touch on too much that I kind of harped on last week is we're long overdue for a changing of the guard. And I think it's almost unfortunate that a lot of the people who would fit that role very well have kind of already given up on it and shifted to other things. Like, it's very unlikely that you're going to pull the Galfons and the Jason Koons of the world back into the spotlight. They've kind of made their way and carved a whole different path. And that's okay. There will be other people instead. But, every generation has a select 10 or 20 that are meant to be the stars.
Agreed. I agree with that.
All right.
I totally do.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a heart out, and we've been going for a while. Would love to keep this discussion going, except our podcast is ending. So, I got to tell you, it feels worse now. This conversation kind of fired me up a little bit. It reignited a little something in me of why I think we all started doing any of this, let alone getting to the point of this podcast. And I hope that there are people to kind of pass the torch to moving forward. But I'm really interested in following along. Outside of Alan's vlog, is there anything else that you're working on that you want to plug?
There is. And I'm hopeful that by the end of the week, there will be a bit of an announcement on something very well related to what we've chatted about here that, maybe gives you an excuse to want to have me back on, and happy to come back on and discuss. But, I'm certainly fighting the fight. I'm walking the walk, so to speak, of trying to make this stuff happen. And my hope is that I just can't announce it right now because it's not up to me to do so. But there is something going on very similar to the stuff we're discussing that I think will be excited for the poker world. And hey, fingers crossed. If it's not this one, then hopefully it inspires whatever this one, the next one will be. So.
Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us. Be sure to follow Dustin on Twitter at DustinI. Stay tuned for that announcement coming up, and be sure to subscribe to Keating's YouTube channel if you haven't already, which I'm sure all of you have. We have. So how have
Thanks,
you not?
guys.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it. All right. That was fun.
That was cool.
I'm pumped.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm ready to rock.
Ready to rock? What do you mean, like move everything out of here and like shut down shop?
Yeah, pretty much.
You guys ready to make no more content?
Yeah. Bring on the movers, boys.
I think we should just have
man.
Jesse, like, if we can get Jesse to come on 4 days a week, I think we have a chance moving this forward somehow.
Just move it to my living room. I got good light in there,
That's good lighting.
I got good lighting.
Good light's important. I will say that.
You don't know. You've never been to my house, Berkey.
Well, I don't know if you have good light, but I know good light is important.
You know what he said?
Look at my light and then look at your light.
I text Berkey every day to come to my house. He's never stopped by. Not once.
You're saying ours is good and yours is bad?
No, the opposite. Once this thing all shuts down, I'm gonna have a lot of free time on my hands, Jess. I'll swing by anytime you want.
All right.
I just wanted to say I'm glad I waited till the end of the podcast to start reading comments. And I've been going back and forth with someone in the comments from 2 episodes ago. I'm just done. I'm just not going to do it anymore.
What was the subject material?
This is when we were talking about that Davies tweet or who all the different things.
Oh, yeah.
On the podcast, I go, I used to long jump 23, 24 feet in high school. And the comment is, the world record is like 28 feet in the long jump or 29 feet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, buddy, I'm not lying. Like, this is just what I did.
Well, I got to tell you, I think you're lying.
Now I'm sending links
We all think you're
of like
lying.
my high school, of like me still having like the stadium record to this day. And like, it's just
to be clear to everybody, not that matters, but long jump is very different than broad jump. You get a full running start. You're gonna go a lot further.
Yeah.
Anyway, whether
I think
or not
an extra 5 feet is a lot as well.
Yeah, perhaps. Whether or not old Guapo over there was top 1% in the world.
He wasn't
long
old
jumping.
Guapo, at some point in his life.
I feel like maybe we would have heard about it. Maybe a newspaper cutout somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I could pull it up on
24
the internet.
feet. I feel like you were winning all the meets at least.
I was.
Okay. Well, all right.
I was the man.
We'll work on that for next show.
Young Guapito was crushing.
That's right. Fewer burritos, of course. We'll be back tomorrow, noon Pacific. Be sure to tune in then. Friday, we're going to be joined by a very special guest. Nick Petrangelo is going to be on. So be sure to look forward to that. We'll see you guys all then.
Later, Scott.
Peace.